first is the relationship comes first. So reminding yourself that when you're working with someone that you lay your head down with at night, that relationship will and should always come before whatever sort of project you're working on. The second is decide on a common goal and ultimately check in with each other on that goal frequently. So if you're not aligned in the beginning, you're never going to achieve what you're ultimately setting out to. Mm-hmm. So that is really important. And I think that we learned that pretty quickly, that, you know, what we wanted out of this might be different, and we needed to align so that our efforts really were rewarding. Third is leverage each other's strengths. So as Ray talked about earlier, is, each of us have different personalities of work and how we go about work, and understanding that that's okay, but leverage that and don't argue when it's not your way. That's me. And then lastly, overall, create balance between work and personal lives. When you're working together, sometimes all of your conversations at the dining room table is what you're working on, not how was your day, how do you feel, what are your thoughts. It's more of what's next, what's to do, did you do it? And it can create this really hard friction around towards each other, because you aren't allowing there to be personal space. It's always professional. So they're my 4 gems. Hopefully everyone can apply it to their lives if they're working with their partners.
Amen. I would say number 1 is being realistic. Working together is not for every couple. Okay. So I think that you need to figure out if a dynamic in your existing personal relationship lends itself to incorporation of a professional component on top of what you already are building or you already have as a personal relationship. And if not, you need to be real with yourself, because the last thing you want is to ruin a perfectly fine or great or good relationship that you have personally by adding something to that. So number 2 would be setting clear. And when I say clear, I mean crystal clear boundaries between the personal and the professional, which kind of ties into what you were saying, Jay, where, because the lines can become blurred between the professional and the personal. And the one thing that I was pretty adamant about in our dynamic was, no, we need to set aside time to have meetings about the pod. Because this isn't something I want to discuss in the car on the way to work or at dinner or whenever, that regular time that we're together is. I want this to be something that is clearly delineated as this is our professional relationship, and this is the time that we set aside to build that. So I think that is really important to people, because I would say that the pod probably would not still be if we hadn't done that. So you already said play to your strengths. Yes. I think that's really important. And I think one of the things is that what you'll find is that the dynamic that's in your personal or private relationship usually will feed into the professional, because you're good at certain things. So lean into that and don't think that you need to change the way that you work or what your work style is just because you also have this professional relationship. And then the last thing is patience is a motherfucking virtue.
Come on.
Listen. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Patience is a motherfucking virtue.
And sometimes you have to be patient with yourself.
Exactly. You will disagree. You will argue. This is natural. But the thing is, how you handle these things, how you handle this disagreement is what is going to ultimately decide whether you are successful or whether you crash and burn.